Ladies and gentlemen of the crypto space, we're live on a Friday, February 14th at 11:48 a.m. And my oh my, does the market look really, really good. Obviously, we have the gold chart up, which is just disgusting. This is just gross. And this is probably your biggest signal through the noise from a financial standpoint. We're seeing a lot of headlines for a signal through the noise, as I've posted on X about geopolitical standpoint or geopolitical considerations, and that's meaningful. All of it contributes to a holistic story about the whole situation, the whole status of the situation. The situation being things that are going on from a financial and political perspective, and it's just important to understand all of it. Everything is so tightly interconnected, the way everything works, and that's part of the narrative we've been discussing for at least the last month, uh, really focusing on administration policy and how that's going to affect economics, and that's exactly what we're seeing really in the data on this Valentine's Day. The DXY down to 106.71, 7 hours for a weekly candle body close, and a weekly candle body close breaching a very interesting level. The 107.35 line, which is obviously been very critical over the last 2 years, 2+ years at this point, with the blow off top in October of 22, the largest level on the DXY, not specifically the dollar, but this particular pairing of varying currencies. Massive level, invalidated, rejection, rejection, breach, and we're on the threshold of a potential invalidation. Thus, the 107.35 line having confluence to tell the story that this is a hell of a level to be rejecting. Obviously, as I've mentioned many times, this level dates back to 1976, complete with all the catastrophic financial conditions associated with the 1980s and the dot-com bust being rejected from this level. This is such a fascinating level from a historical standpoint. Rejection, finally a rejection after a period of time, a couple of years, rejection after a couple of years, and it looks like something similar is playing out, bit of a different structure. Not that it was a breach to the upside for years time frame, but we certainly breached this level to the upside once and now twice, and we'll see if we're rejected in the end. Obviously, I'm here talking to you with my expectation being that this will reject in the end. It's just perfectly consistent with administration policy. It's perfectly consistent with the rules-based order at the global financial system level. And if you want continuity of the status quo, this must reject. So therefore, policy is going to reflect the necessity of the global economic system that it does reject. I mean, really, the reality for international currencies is it's all relative. Therefore, it's all geopolitically managed, the geopolitical collusion we often talked about. And in that regard, the conversations between nation states is not, is it going to reject, but what are the relationships and deals and agreements that must be made for it to reject? Simple as that. Bitcoin dominance down nicely. The non-Bitcoin space, I will refrain as best as possible from using the relatively derogatory terminology of the altcoin space. Certainly not all encompassing of everything that's going on outside of Bitcoin land. We obviously have the granular distinction between what is crypto fintech and altcoin bullshit. But generally speaking, when Bitcoin dominance goes down, not Bitcoin's going up, with crypto fintech getting lumped into this very broad and stereotypical category of altcoins. But as we've been discussing, this is potentially that last blow off top move from a monthly perspective. Ultimately, this 100 SMA is indicating that the downward trajectory that we are still on from a monthly perspective. So I expect this to be invalidated at some point. We fall back below the guppies. Guppies remain gray, they don't turn green. And we continue our downward trend. Whether we get a lower low, that's another story. Uh, So far, this has early signs of a triangle compression, higher lows and lower highs. What that means, check back 2030, and we'll be able to have a conversation in that regard. Curve settling in at 53 cents. Zoom into the weekly. We'll see that there is clearly an expression of support on the weekly 10. We are below the weekly 100, still following this bottoming pattern, bit of an inverse head and shoulders in many regards. And this presents this current price action over the last 2 months, 3 months as very constructive. This is further confidence suggesting this was a bottoming pattern, especially with a breach to the upside, and more or less a retest of previous resistance flipping support. Anything else going on? Here is something that I mentioned to folks on another channel. When you look at the S&P and the Nasdaq, clearly we broke out significantly from 21 highs. Same for the S&P, 21 highs, significantly higher. But if you look at the IWM Russell 2000 and daily look at, Wilshire 5000, this thing looks like shit in comparison. So it's important for folks to understand the stock market is completely decimated. And that's what folks really don't inspect when they look at the S&P 500 or Nasdaq. They see up, up, and away. Those are the headlines on mainstream media. But from a broad inspection of the stock market, it's basically decimated and hasn't gone anywhere in years. And that is literally what you see in this chart. So, stock market hasn't done well. This is just double top territory. And this stat is clearly a very different story than what most people hear. Like, oh, the stock market's doing so well, yet crypto space isn't doing so well. No, the stock market is decimated. This is horrible. All the takeaway can only be that there's an overwhelming concentration of capital into few stocks, and that's exactly what everyone's been talking about, Magnificent Seven and whatnot, as well as a variety of macro folks, literally showing the concentration of capital being at historic levels last time seen at 1929. And that is exactly what looking at these three charts tells us is actually the case. Stock market it's not even not good. It is it's decimated. There's an absolute lack of investment, overwhelming expression of malinvestment, and you can call it a debauchery. You could call it a fabrication. Yeah, sure. A concentration of capital does not express investment due diligence. It's an expression of just folks buying shit because shit is going up, which obviously is a perversion, and that is ultimately the final inspection from an S&P and Nasdaq perspective. But the IWM is signal through the noise, indicating this entire stock market has done fuck all for the last 2+ years. How about that? Um, Anything else? China's still decimated. Yesterday's conversation between Mike Howell and Raoul Pal was very interesting. Not that that's stuff that we don't talk about, but those are folks that can have very much more detailed conversations than I can possibly offer. So, of the content that I watch, that is something that is more so consumable by me, meaning I don't really watch much shit anymore. Most of the stories I know. Um, but there was, I got probably like 20, 30 minutes into it. That's all I could take. Uh, but their insight and their perspective on where things are and where things are heading, short, medium, and long term, are still very interesting to me. Uh, any good takeaways? They did talk about extension of liquidity cycle, particularly because of the issuance skew at the Treasury level. And Raul was thinking, if there's been like a 30% issuance skew, um, does it shorten the duration of cycles, considering the overall composition of debt outstanding? So instead of like 4-year cycles, do we see 2.5, 3-year cycles? And these are very interesting questions, and only hindsight will offer the answer to these questions. But that was an interesting takeaway. And it makes sense. If your overall composition of debt is skewed towards shorter term, shorter duration, it's going to have a significant effect on the overall refinancing needs of the debt issuer, being the US government in this instance, which means, for instance, this year they have to refinance close to $10 trillion. And in 2028, maybe they have to, or maybe 27, 26, they have to refinance four or five, an outsized amount of debt as compared to what they had to historically do in the interim between the core, 4-year cyclicality of the overall um, aggregate of debt outstanding. So that was very interesting takeaways. But they still have to refinance it. So aside from prevailing administration talks and like Doge and whatnot, trimming expenses. This is all great. This is all heading in the right direction, but it's like a Lynn Alden statement. Nothing stops this train because no matter what you do, if you're able to balance the budget, okay, finally, we got folks that aren't dumb as shit in government and are able to balance a budget. I mean, if you're unable to balance a budget, you're doing something wrong at a personal level. So at a government level, it's fucked up. Aside from that, you still have this massive debt pile that needs to be managed. And that means it needs to be refinanced. So nothing changes in that equation, even if you literally balance the budget. I mean, even if you get like a $1 trillion surplus, $2 trillion surplus, which would be freaking crazy, which we haven't had in what, a generation of politics. Um, for maybe brief glimpses of time, there was a bit of a surplus. I think it was Clinton. Um, it's irrelevant. Let's say you're at 37 trillion, you take 2 trill off of it, and you have to refinance 35 instead of 37. All right, fine, you're heading in the right direction, but nothing stops the train with regard to what is required to actually manage that pile of shit. So, as much as things are interesting and things appear to be changing in the right way, from an economic standpoint, that doesn't change the equation where things are heading financially because of the requirements to keep the status quo being the status quo. Haven't seen the move yet, even close with regard to Ethereum, but Ethereum dollar denominator looks stunning from a 200 on the weekly standpoint. Wow. Wow. I mean, it's literally stunning from a dollar denominated perspective. And you can always have the argument and conversation from a portfolio construction perspective and how you denominate the portfolio. Do you Bitcoin denominate it or dollar denominated? That's a very historic question. But what I've gotten good at over the last years is realizing some things are irrelevant. And what's pertinent is sure, you should have a component of the portfolio that's Bitcoin centric and a certain part of the portfolio that's dollar centric, but that's irrelevant from a capital management standpoint because of the classifications of the types of assets. Is it a collateral? Is it a cash? Or is it a fintech, a business that you own that produces cash flow? So the healthy portfolio really requires that kind of composition or that kind of perspective to really be able to construct a healthy portfolio. And in that regard, dollar denominated inspection of Ethereum is absolutely meaningful. And this is an absolutely stunning chart from a dollar denominated perspective. Clearly a triangular compression with a bit of a breach to the upside in December of last year. But this is firmly riding the 200 SMA on the weekly. I mean, this is as clear as you get. This is stunning, actually, especially as compared to cycles past 2017, 2018, following up, and obviously end of 18 and into 2020, Ethereum didn't do well at all from a dollar denominated perspective. And now this expression right here of riding to 200, um, stunningly different. This is a stunning chart by any measure, other than obviously a Bitcoin denominated measure. But that's aside from the point. Stunning Bitcoin chart. Let's not look at it. Obviously, Ethereum sucks from a dollar denominated perspective as compared to Bitcoin, but that's only part of the consideration. That's only part. Our world still revolves around the dollar. Therefore, the answer isn't always Bitcoin fixes everything. There's a lot of other considerations. And if you simplify it to that statement, it's probably not the most sophisticated, you know, mental framework for managing capital. A lot of other considerations. Um, Anything else? Oh, I did some nice posts this morning. Um, found got OpenAI to do an incredible amount of work. I could talk about that stuff if you guys want. Obviously, I'll show you real quick, and then we'll go over to the comments. This stuff's crazy what robotics is doing. Slowly, then all at once is probably an understatement at this point. Just crazy. This is just going to happen so quick heading into 2030. Everything's going to change. This was a nice thing to see. Personal expression at a presidential level. Um, you know, I don't want to talk politics, but it's good to see nation states working together. Dare we say that's a good thing? It's a good thing. That's a personal expression right there. That's pretty cool. This was a hell of an article that I was able to coerce AI to write. And I've obviously dubbed this, Open AI Esquire. And I think I'll just continue to be writing some of these articles. Not that I'm writing it, but you still have to know how to ask the right questions in order to get the output that you're looking for. So this was a very constructive thing. That's a massive amount of work. I mean, how long would it take to sit through and read 50 state statutes? The CFR, the federal level, is what, 90 million words they were talking about? And how big are the state statutes? They're not tiny. There's a lot of information in them. So the fact that AI could scour all this state statute and find the very specific code that I was asking it to find is quite astounding. This is every state in the United States. And here's all the codes. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. So I have a lot of fun with this, considering the work I've done over the last years in my business structure. This is a nice way to culminate all of that work in that I know the right questions to ask, and therefore the AI is able to do a tremendous amount of work for me to create these types of articles. So it's very, very interesting what's going on. Let's do some commentary. If you're on X or on YouTube and you have any questions, feel welcome to ask anything on your mind. I'm more than happy to go over it. The advisors in the house, good morning. Shabbat Shalom. Always a pleasure, my friend. Fugu, good morning, rational people. I'm ready for a daily dose of intellectual rations. That will be provided. DCA man, good morning. Killers, happy Valentine's Day to you as well. Fugu, to you as well also. A lot of men have lost money chasing women, but no man has ever lost a woman chasing money. That is a complicated one, maybe a little controversial to a degree, but certainly a true statement. Interesting to say the least. These guys. 1 second. The office calls. This might be a mid to relatively short duration stream. I'll do my best. Fugu, pleasure. Much pleasure. Anna Sec, good morning. Trevor, peace. Yes, indeedy. I think you're probably appreciating some of these OpenAI Esquire type articles. I'm sure this is quite useful to a lot of folks because this is the whole 50 United States, meaning, what's a synopsis here? Almost all states have been consistent with the UPIA, and that's old. It's now called the UFIPA. Probably about 5 or 6 states have adopted the full-fledged UFIPA, as in sections 738 in Florida code. But clearly, I could do a research on which states fully adopted that'd be an entire article into itself. Is it the full UFIPA, the old school UPIA, or just, extracts and derivations thereof? It's kind of irrelevant. What's pertinent is what do the statutes say, and in that regard, it doesn't matter whether it's an actual adopted UFIPA or not. But these are the state statutes across the United States that basically say a quite extraordinary reality. And it comes back to capital management. And is it in a personal setting? Is it in a corporate setting? Or is it in a trust setting? And clearly these are intimidating conversations. Most people operate at a personal level. And, you know, I remember for myself back in the day, I was like, how do I create a corporation? I go to like legalzoom.com. It's very intimidating. Like, what is a corporation? And ultimately, it's just like writing down things on a paper, filing paper if requested, which is sending it in email or in an envelope to a destination. Um, and then I landed so many years later on this concept of a trust, which is literally you have nothing to submit, nothing to file, nothing, 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 and all you're doing is writing words on a piece of paper and notarizing it. So it's a very personal thing. And it turns out, like in hindsight, as always, it's so much simpler than people think it is. Um, and that's so often the case for so many topics. I mean, look at our capital management methodology. How simple is it in hindsight? It's okay. I want to invest in cryptocurrency. All right. Rule number one, buy more assets. All right. Now the next question is what to buy. All right, great. There's a whole process for identifying what to buy, and we look at fintech, cash flow positive fintech. And then a more recent rule that I'm trying to hit home with on social media, when do you stop buying assets cyclically? Respect the market. I need to buy more assets, but I probably should stop buying assets at some point. It turns out these rules are very simple. And that's a big expression of in hindsight, it was much simpler than I ever thought it was. And that is perfectly the case with capital management as well as business structuring. It's, I spent so much time on this stuff and then I'm like, damn, how do you get from point A to point B without going on a crazy winding journey? And then you realize point B is like not 1,000 miles away. It's like a mile away next door in the town over. It's, that's a decent, visualizable expression of kind of how simple this stuff is. But the journey, the winding path that takes you 1,000 miles to go to the town next door, uh, is actually just understanding that it's all next door and how simple it really is. It's crazy, really is. That's kind of in good part why I'm trying to do some of these articles. Um, It's a couple of good ones at this point. The original one, which is more so trust centric, capital management we did, very Florida centric one, tax treatment of Florida trust administrative obligations. Then it's obviously this very broad one for a 50 state type of inspection. But these are some very relatively simple articles. Does it have the word count? No. This is like 1,000 words. This one's even shorter. 1,000 word article. This was a big one. This was just me asking AI like delineate between trading and investing, and it did a pretty good job. Not the best formatting, but pretty good. And this is really the culmination. This is actually this is a really powerful article, um, especially for folks that live in Florida because that's where I did all my work from. This just says everything. So I have documentation that's over 100 pages worth of work that took 2+ years to build. And this is really the core of all of it. So, being able to compress the most important parts of 100 pages worth of work into what 1,500 words. You only do this shit with AI. It's really astounding what's possible nowadays. This would have cost over $10,000. Got to be more for a paralegal to do all of this research for 50 states. It's really insane. Anyway, I digress. Here on XR and YouTube, feel welcome to ask any questions. Let's keep the party going for a little bit. Otherwise, I'm going to answer my colleagues' questions about work. Yo, cap, income, time horizon, and a whole lot of peace. My rational way. It's hard to tell someone, especially a young person. It's like, I want to get into crypto, and they're look at all this meme coin frenzy for the quick returns that ends up being losses. Just everyone loses, except the one or two people that are able to clock out a couple of mil, and then they crash the chart 90%, and then it just keeps crashing because there goes the momentum. It just gets decimated. That's why we have the rules, Dean. Own more assets, great. For a young person, all those emotions get involved. Like, fuck, I can't stand my job. I hate my job. I need to get out, and they want a quick solution. The number one rule on more assets is not it's not a task. That is a lifestyle. It means you get a paycheck at the end of the week. How much more assets do you buy? What assets do you buy? When do you cyclically stop buying assets? And you're going to sit through cycles. You're going to sit through business cycles. You're going to sit through economic cycles. You're going to sit through debt refinancing cycles. You're going to sit through the booms and the busts of these crypto markets. And that's why my mindset is so in the next crypto cycle. And we haven't even had this crypto cycle. We haven't even had this crypto cycle. I mention it from time to time on social media, but on the weekly chart, we have not had this crypto cycle. There has been no bull market in the crypto space. None since 2021, period. Red guppies on the weekly chart for the DXY. That is your crypto bull market where shit gets crazy. Everything gets monetized. Everything is up and to the right. Everything is parabolic week after week after week. And we have not had that. So that's a very important thing to understand. And for the young folks that want something in a short period of time, expect to sit through a boom, a bust. If you have not owned assets through the bust, you need to experience that. You need to experience just how irrelevant it is. You're accumulating assets. What does it have to do with a boom and a bust? All right, price is up, buy less assets. Price is down, buy more assets. Always respect the amount of capital you have. So that means you can't spend all your money. You need to understand the cash position. So if you get $1,000, $2,000 a week in income or whatever it is, can't spend all your money. How much do you have that's extra? $100. If $1,000 a week, $100 a week sounds excessive. Maybe $50 a week probably seems doable. And this is why I've mentioned to you guys the story of what I tell my cousins. Do not leave home. Maybe don't even go to college, just work at Best Buy, but that requires a certain level of sacrifice. You're making 50 grand a year, and if you're able to invest 30 grand a year of it, oh my God, you're done at 30. You're done at 30. I mean, your CAGR, compound average growth rate, in the first couple of years is averaging down from 100%. That is an insane CAGR. 30 grand invested year one, 30 grand invested year two. Your CAGR is 100%. That's insane. And that's not even including any appreciation that occurs. And you could obviously consider any depreciation that occurs, but the point is you're invested at a 100% CAGR, not total net worth type inspection. So so much to take away from the stories we've told from a youth guidance perspective, and all the hindsight that we have about our trials and tribulations dealing with the emotions of the volatility in these markets. It's hard to put that into words. People need to experience it. So I definitely encourage anyone who's young to just accumulate assets at a reasonable pace based on the amount of excess capital they have, which means bull bear market is irrelevant. You need to have assets and experience that parabolic boom and that monumental epic bust that the crypto space is known for. You need to experience it. You need to. And that's not a bad thing. I promise you that. It's not. Because everyone's wrong. And even myself is wrong in many regards. And that's the perspective I tell my stories from. It's not about being wrong or right. It's about survival. And if have a different perspective on how to engage these markets, you survive. You own assets that go up in price, you own assets that go down in price. What's pertinent is that you own assets. Rule number one, accumulate more assets. The rules don't have anything about price in them. Obviously, you got a lot of considerations on what assets to buy, and that's an entire process unto itself. But over time, just follow rule number one, own more of the right assets, which means over time, there's considerations in capital management of when do you exit something, an invalidation of a narrative, or you sell the losers and redistribute capital to the winners, and what is a healthy cash position of the portfolio. These are very existential questions that only you folks can answer yourselves, very subjective questions. Good morning from X, my friend, always a pleasure. Fugu, Cap, what software do you use for your live stream? StreamYard. StreamYard.com. Easy peasy. Did you see the proof of concepts of Gnosis VPN? Very interesting. There's been a couple over the years, the centralized VPN type concepts. VPN is much more meaningful outside of the US than in the US, albeit from in the US because of regulatory climate over the last couple of years. It's been very useful, but it's so much more useful in uh, political environments that are keen on censorship. So VPN is a way for an individual to express their individual rights to access information and make good decisions based on solid information. So, VPN technology is meaningful. From an investment perspective, I don't really care. But from a consumption standpoint, I certainly have an appreciation for VPN type products. Train people, digi. Those are the good old days. Now, I've seen some videos of myself and when I go through photo albums with my kids uh, over the last years, and I see those old videos. Those were good days. Um, Obviously, we have our own journey, our own start that leads us to where we are. And, that was more so what, 2015, 2016? I don't know. No, that's a little too early. It's probably like 2018 and then 2019. That's what I was doing a lot of that Android app for the Digibuy wallet. Those were good days. Good people, quality product, great tech. But nowadays, we have to be reasonable. Great tech isn't always the greatest investment. So, an investment, to be a rational investor, we need to be rational in capital management, which means we need a much more robust methodology, much more sophisticated perspective on the reality of what this global economic system is. We need to have understanding of politics and geopolitics and the way all of this shit works together, the way the whole system works. It's not as simple as folks think it is. Certainly from a geopolitical standpoint, definitely from a global economic standpoint, but that's where I try and hit home with my stories. From a personal capital management standpoint, you need to simplify. Why? Because our personal capital management requires effort and work, and the goal, the destination that everyone should keep in mind is to have a very simple methodology. So you don't have to put in much work and you don't have a lot of tasks. You've minimized the amount of work you need to do because then it's sustainable. Then you're just following very basic rules, rinse, repeat. Sustainability. And that's what minimizes emotional stress, anxiety, frustrations. The most important thing with regard to capital management is time. And for time, you need to be cool, calm, and collected. If you're not, it's not healthy. And that's something to cure. And that should be your first and foremost thing that you do, which requires a reset. Think about things differently. Anywho, that's where I would love people to head in response to these conversations, to think about things a little bit differently. And very important to note, I don't have the answers. I don't purport to offer the answers. What I do is have the conversation. What I do is have my examples of what I do in order to achieve peace of mind, to achieve progress with regard to capital management, with regard to business structuring. These are the things that I've gone through that led me to here to have this conversation with you. That shoot from the hip. This is all an ad hoc conversation every day. There's no preparation for any of these conversations. It's just me talking about the things that you guys bring up in comment, the things that I'm looking at in real time chart data. It's just I'm observing. That's primarily my routine at this point. I observe the market so to understand where we are today. And that's it. Everything else with regard to capital management is set in stone at this point. Own more assets, know when to stop owning assets, own the right assets, which requires a technological understanding of these systems, what they mean at a tech level, what they mean at a financial level, how the time horizon involved in the maturation and monetization of these assets, which is really a political type of conversation. So I have my time frames in my mind of where how long it will take to get from where we are to where things where I expect things to be. And that leaves me cool, calm, and collected. Much a pleasure. Connect the dots. It seems to me that we're getting gradually closer to risk on with most macro trends. Agree or disagree? Agree, agree, agree. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Raul and Michael seem to be alluding to refinancing of U.S. debt will require DXY down. Not such a sophisticated conversation. I literally just fixed a bug this morning with my colleague, and it was just the most ridiculous scenario. Um, I'm just highlighting that, man, it gets complicated sometimes. So, separate systems, the dollar versus refinancing, obviously interconnected to a degree, loosely coupled from a software developer standpoint is a good expression to explain it. You have two components of a financial system. You have a currency and you have debt instruments. Well, debt instruments are collateral. So you have collateral and currency. Um, DXY down requires geopolitical collusion. That's arrangements and negotiations between countries. DXY down changes all the equation with regard to debt issuance and refinancing obligations, debt servicing obligations. So it's loosely coupled. There's obviously a lot of other components that play into, collateral issuance and debt refinancing obligations, tax receipts, and deficit spending, so on and so forth. Well, look what's going on. Frankly, the whole world is changing with this administration uh, in arguably generationally good ways, considering what has been the status quo for so long. Um, it only makes sense to have a lean and efficient and responsive and transparent, accounting books and put the government on the blockchain so everyone can see, and that's going to pretty much ensure that things are getting spent in the right places. That's a good thing. These are good things, but this also indicates that things are changing, and change tends to be volatile. Note that volatile doesn't imply down. Volatile might be up, um, but certainly things are changing. DXY down is pretty much the consensus for what is required. It's required not necessarily because of debt servicing requirements, as what you're saying. It's required because of geopolitical reasons, I would argue, first and foremost. If you want other nations to have not even overwhelmingly successful economies, but just continuing to exist economies, you can't have the dollar at this level. You need to give other currencies a chance to exist. So currencies are relative, meaning um, clearly people think about, oh, the dollar has decreased in value 99.99%. Yes, these are true statements. But relative to other currencies, that's not the conversation to have. And then you look at the cross currency pairings. You know, if you start appreciating the dollar to cure the 99% collapse in the value of the dollar, there is no other currency on the planet. They don't exist. And that destabilizes the entire system to the point where there's utter chaos, including for the United States wanting to appreciate the dollar. So, isn't that an interesting one? Folks are so easy to talk about that on social media, how the value of the dollar has collapsed 99%. But if you start to appreciate the dollar, all of a sudden there is no China, there's no other country. There's literally chaos. All their currencies collapse into worthlessness because their economies will collapse because their purchasing power dollar denominator for their currency is worthless, so they can no longer pay their debt obligations, and that's it. It's a non-starter for the continuity of their economy. It's gone, and that in turn literally collapses the United States because now we have no imports and we are dependent on imports because of globalization since the 70s. So all of a sudden, that 99% down chart of the dollar is like, yeah, it's not so simple. Not so simple. Was getting the sense that Trump may understand this and is rushing to it. Yeah, I certainly think they understand that. They understand. I don't want to talk politics too much. There's one thing I understand. A lot of things I understand. You might not, there's obviously conflicting cultural differences between countries. There's conflicting opinions about how other countries behave from moral and ethical perspectives. It kind of reminds me of how I don't get myopic with my capital management philosophy, but I am rigorous. It's not an emotional process. There's rules. So there's an overarching rule that I could apply to politics. It's like, it doesn't fucking matter. Get along with everyone. You need to be an arbiter. Every country needs to be respected for their own realities, and everyone has a different reality. Clearly, there's infinite complexity with politics, like colonialism and imperialism. Those are massive complexities. So I don't want to get into the complexities that resulted in shit like NATO and you know World War II and whatnot, and the world wars axes. It gets very complicated. But the point is, overarching rules of politics are get along with everyone. I don't give a shit if you have conflict with them. I don't care if you think they're culturally and morally bankrupt. Get along with them because when you get along with folks, you are productive and constructive. Don't get along with folks, you're isolating yourself and creating tension, likely enemies in the process. Just fucking get along with everyone, for Christ's sake. And that's clearly something that is expressed by this administration's tone and delivery, their talking points. So literally the way I manage my rules for capital management, apply that to what I'm saying now. It's like, great, get along with everyone. And then everyone's like, no, they're morally evil. It's irrelevant. Invalidate that as a thinking point in the thought process of how you engage. Doesn't matter. The rule, get along with everyone. It was like, uh, honey works better than, I don't know, some shit you would say to a kid. Like, just get along with everyone. And it doesn't matter anything else. That's the most important thing. Friends. Uh, and you don't let fucking people take advantage of you. Fuck that. So that's cool. But do it in a way where your goal is to get along with everyone. Like, like you're getting bullied, which is actually something that folks say often. But you don't want retribution. You don't want payback. You get along. The goal is to shut them the fuck up and be like, I know what you're doing. Let's figure something out. Let's work through it and let's get along. And even if it's a contentious arrangement, it's still getting along. You got to get along. And then obviously it gets complicated, infinitely complicated with regard to folks that violate that reality, which is why you need a big stick. Now, it's where the Defense Department comes in. So have a big stick. but get along. So what does that mean? That this is all, everything in politics is tightrope walking. Um, and it really reduces to semantic capacity for uh, international folks, the ambassadors and the administration, because you got to use the right words. You're not going to get along unless you can use the right words and express the right emotions and signal the right gestures. So that these bring up very interesting questions. Um, I understand a lot about politics and how I've been pretty good at politicking. Not that I have any interest in it, but I certainly understand it because I understand psychology. I understand concepts of empathy and should avoid concepts of sympathy. Don't feel bad for people. Feel bad because you understand people. Um, and I understand, relationships and deals. You got to understand the human condition, and that's kind of a common ground because everyone has the human condition. Everyone fights there for their own interests. And no matter what any religious text says, everyone ultimately has a degree of greed. So when you understand these are the driving forces in humans individually, no matter what, the desire to consume is always there. I don't care how religious a person is. I could be talking to the most Christian person in the southwest of the United States, and they're going to love that brand new Yukon Denali. Ooh, they love it. It's the desire to consume. It's always there. So everyone has that human condition and that commonality. And it doesn't even matter what country you're in. Everyone is ultimately the same in so many regards. Yet we focus on the differences. We fight over the differences. It just shows you how immature humanity as a species is. So the real, that means the only path forward is to realize all that is bullshit and be like, and this is what folks talk about often, understand our differences and just fucking get along. Whatever, I'm talking politics and very, popular talking points like, you know, I don't want to get contentious. Dare I say DEI? Fine, I said it. And my response to that type of position would be, just fucking get along. I don't need no policy to tell me to be nice to people. I don't need no training to tell me to. Then you'll have the politicians say, oh, there's fucked up people out there that are a bunch of dicks. Stop being a dick, people. Be nice to people. Everyone's going to have different interests and they'll want to be different. Be nice to them. That's obviously bleeds into like government waste and shit like that. Just be nice to people. And that should be the whole policy. Executive order. Be fucking nice to people. Try and understand them, accept them, help them, be empathetic, supportive. If they're having a tough day, how can I help you? What's going on? Do you need anything? Can I get you a drink? You want a cup of tea? You want to sit and talk? Be nice to people. What the fuck is the matter with people? What the fuck is the matter with humans that we need government policies in the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars to literally tell people to be nice to people? What the fuck? Sorry. Because literally, you know what? That statement I just had literally solves all this contention. You got all these folks that are all emotional about my right. Yes, you have the right to do whatever the fuck you want to do and be whoever the fuck you want to be. And everyone else should be fucking nice to you. I believe, doesn't that solve everything? You have no right to be mean to someone else. That is wrong. Isn't that a simple answer to the entire conversation that so many folks are fighting about? It's a simple answer. And in conclusion, just be nice to people. That's all people want. We have no right to control other people. That's another big thing in politics. They love to control other people. and set moral standards, moral degeneracy. You know what? Society is an expression of everyone's individual moral stance. That's a society. They used to call America the melting pot. Everyone had their own opinion, and that's cool. Isn't that like constitutional principles? Freedom of speech and whatnot is be whoever you want to be. Follow the law, the rules, as in you don't kill anyone, don't commit fraud, don't steal. And frankly, this all boils down to like basic religious texts, like Ten Commandments and shit. Just don't be a, and then really, isn't that the thing? All the religious texts and so many of our laws boil down to don't be a dick. Don't be a dick. Be nice. Understand people. Get along. Be constructive. Make friends. So much of geopolitics is like kids on a playground. No, that's mine. That's no, I want that. We're not kids anymore. Grown ass adults, people. Okay, I digress. Talking about this shit on a crypto-centric channel. Using the well, it's not the so here's the kicker. You're using the dollar strength to tell everyone to sit the fuck down and stop being a dick. Let's come to an agreement and be nice to each other. That's really what it is. And that's actually quite what I've been saying the last 10 minutes. How do you get a bully to stop bullying you? You be it you have to use leverage. How do you get through someone that's angry at you? You got to force him to sit down so you can talk and be like, all right, let's talk about this. Let's not be a dick to each other. Let's work on things constructively. Really, the culmination of everything I just said. When is the year that debt actually critical to refinance is spread out? I don't know. It's not now. It's not now. It's really out of treasury and how they refinance at what issuance, what tenor, what duration, stuff like that. Yams in the house. Shabbat shalom. Always a pleasure. Yes, indeedy. Everyone else. I thought a concept. You're a people person. I'm just, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not a dick. Just be nice to people and don't be a dick. That's it. We just simplified every religious text on the planet. We just simplified the crap out of geopolitics. Make friends, play nice, help people as best as you can within reason, and that gets complicated with regard to like socialism tendencies. That's complicated. That's the reason socialism always fails, and because it's against natural instinct, personal consumption, concepts of greed and whatnot. And so we should discourage that at the individual level. And but I sure as hell like a nice shower or a decent car. But if you're too greedy, you fuck up your finances. You want to do that, so you need to counter your emotional instinct to be like, all right, I might want the Maserati, but I should probably get just like a nice BMW instead of blowing a bank account. Just be reasonable. Reasonableness. There's a reason reasonableness is such a key component in law. So much of law has the word reasonable in it. It's quite remarkable, actually. Coming from a person that reads the law, reads that CFR. The CFR that everyone has been saying is 90 million words. And with AI now, you could read the CFR. So reasonableness is a hell of a word. Thank you, Athletic Concept. To you as well, my friend. Cap, if you ever come to Spain for the holidays, I will give you a gift. I appreciate that. I have a family in Spain, not close family, but cousins. Never been there. Would love to do that. That'd be nice one day. My wife would love to travel more. Obviously, with the kids, we don't get a chance to do that much, if at all. Um, you know, nice thoughts. One day type things when time, work, financial capacity affords such activities. And for the meantime, I just continue to do what I do. I love these streams. I love, when I tell you this whole story today, It's like my journal, and I get to get all these things off my chest. And as much as I help folks grow by having these conversations, which gives you these ideas, the being able to express these things allows me to grow and improve my thoughts and mature and enhance the way I think about things. So this is a win-win for everybody that I get to get all this shit off my chest. um, all right, comes to the end of the stream right about now. We're at 106.69. We're looking for a close right about here. Dollar doesn't move for the rest of the day. Yay! Because we look at weekly candles. Daily will drive you nuts. So weekly close here is constructive. Now we're looking for the rest of February. Two more candles. Let's see, rejection of 107.34. We'll push to the upside, and then we want to see a lower low. Lower low, lower high is the direction we want to see. Get a nice leg down, just like we did 2 times in 2024, which folks would have called a bull market, which it wasn't. You're going to have a hell of a market. Now, you get down to the 200 SMA and the weekly at a 103, things are going to be ripping left and right, just like we saw in 2024. But then you get the breach of the 200 SMA to the downside. Then what reprices to the 200 SMA, when everything's ripping left and right, it breaches, then is another story. Then all the folks since 2021 who have had, the thought in their mind that crypto changes everything, then folks get to see what crypto does. Then it gets weird. Then it gets really weird. That's when you're sitting on a 10x in one of your key portfolio components. Um, you know, when you hit the 200 SMA, that's when that 10x goes another 50x, and it gets gross, and you're sitting on a 500x. And then obviously, then something breaks, the dollar starts ripping, and that 500x collapses to a 20x. And that is the experience that I said earlier that folks need to really live through. If you want to accumulate more assets, you need to watch something go absolutely disgustingly parabolic, where a $10,000 portfolio turns into $50 million and collapses to $2 million. You need to experience something like that. Then and only then will you realize all of it is noise. And what matters is anxiety reduction, sustainability, and your emotional wellness. That is what I will continue to encourage, no matter what anyone would say to the contrary. Oh, I should have sold at 50 mil. Yeah, okay, great. You know how much work is involved in that? You know how much anxiety there is in trading those components and portfolio components. I'm not here for that. I'm here for trying to tell people a way that increases their odds of success, increases their odds of being emotionally stable and psychologically healthy. And that is what I will continue to do. Friday, February 14th at 12:46 p.m. I thank you all for joining me today. 288 people made it to the end of the stream. I appreciate each and every one of you, and together we are all a little bit more rational because of it. I wish you all a wonderful weekend. It is a Friday, so I will see you, ladies and gentlemen, again on Monday. So keep your heads on, stay calm, cool, collected, and that's the only way really to make a little bit or make better decisions. So until then, peace.